Hi, in this video I'm going to be talking about our mindset when prospecting. As part of a voiceover business, we need to locate leads. We need to locate people who might want to use our voiceover services in some way, identify what their needs are, and then be able to cater our message to them appropriately. And also a way of doing that is ascertaining what particular areas of voiceover that we want to kind of work in. So what makes us passionate, but also in terms of where our voice may lend ourselves to particular kinds of work that we can look into as well. And as a result, as part of this kind of prospecting, after you've done maybe some of the usual suspects, the most obvious areas, such as video production, for example, or digital marketing companies, or e-learning companies, or video games companies, or game devs, when we start to get into little particular niches, that's when there seems to be a greater level of risk involved in terms of the level of certainty. Because whereas with a video production company, they might have numerous different projects which may at some point be suitable for a voiceover company. If you decide to target something more niche, a particular area where they don't use voiceover regularly, or they might not use your type of voiceover regularly, then obviously the ratio of conversions in terms of turning leads into prospects, let alone clients, may be much smaller. Now, this is tricky, but it should not be used as an excuse. And this is something that I very much had to kind of really get over towards the beginning of this year, because I'd kind of done my initial kind of lead generation globally, looking for those kind of most obvious suspects in those kind of key genres that I first started out. And I wanted to kind of niche down into particular areas where I thought there may be traction for my voiceover services, but I wasn't sure. So as an example, in the first quarter of 2021, I looked at estate agents and real estate providers, specifically in the UK, and then I kind of like branched out from there, thinking that yes, there seems to be a very high demand in terms of in some sectors, video tours of properties, and when you can add value by adding narration, especially on the luxury end of things. But I didn't really know how it was going to turn out. So I did some research, I got some lead generation done as well, and I went through all of those results. And what I actually found in terms of conversion rates, if you want to deal with that, was that it was a much lower conversion rate in terms of what I would normally expect if I was reaching out to video production companies, which wasn't necessarily a surprise, but was still took me aback to begin with, because when you're led by the numbers and you're led by the idea of return of investment being crucial to your business, because you're investing your own time, sometimes you may be investing, money in a freelancer to do the lead generation for you as well. So you want to make sure that your investment is doing the best that it possibly can. However, I would say that that is not wasted time or wasted money. And the reason for that is because it was a market that I identified with a certain degree of self-awareness. I thought there's definitely some voiceover is being used there. People are used to voice real estate stuff all of the time. So that is a market. It's a market where I think that my voice could certainly be used. And I conducted the research as well as I could at the time. So I didn't just kind of blithely just kind of bang on Google. I did some research beforehand in terms of looking at what other voiceover actors had done. There were a couple of voiceover actors who had even created whole documents which they used as pitch documents to real estate providers over the last 10 years. So I sourced all of these different things to build my content, to build, that initial email, and then the follow-up emails, hopefully adding value and explaining why my services might be appropriate to them. So first of all, I did do my due diligence in terms of the research and in terms of the content, which insulates me a little bit more when the actual return on investment wasn't that great. So I think I reached out to a total of about 2,300 real estate providers of various forms, at various different scales, and I did get traction, but my success ratio in terms of turning people into prospects, people who are interested in me, went from about 1 in 9 or 1 in 10 to more like 1 in about 25 or 1 in 30 that even got back to me. Now, there are a number of reasons for this, and I don't know what all of the reasons are, but I don't think of that as wasted time. And this is why I'm looping back into the whole mindset thing about things. We all talk about failure and how necessarily important failure is. Try again and fail better. But when we actually experience a failure in some way, shape or form, then it's very easy for us to kind of default into, I've just wasted time. I shouldn't have done this. I've made a terrible mistake with my life, with my business, and it's all going downhill from there. So, to try and kind of get over that in terms of your mindset, I ask myself, have I approached this as thoroughly as I possibly could in terms of identifying what the client pain points are? And if I haven't, if there are other things that I think are missing in that equation, then I mark down what those are. Now, for the real estate issue, for example, there wasn't any kind of like core example, but through the course of the 3 months that I kind of focused on that area, I definitely refined my content. I created a whole show reel specifically for that niche as well. I created a whole page on my website for that niche as well, which was all kind of like the toing and froing of the dialogue of actually getting that prospecting done and in action kind of forced me to realize that I needed to make certain things as a result. So that was good. And I've got a whole kind of like chain of correspondence in terms of like how I would follow up and everything that I am happy with now. So there is that. Then there's awareness about where my voice fits in terms of the market, and certainly in terms of the positive responses that I did get, I found that my responses were actually more from the kind of the luxury end of the market, which makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, because a lot of the voice work that I do is for the more luxury end because of how I sound. And so therefore, with people with companies or organizations that have bigger budgets, they're more likely to make that investment in products because they're dealing with properties which are much larger and much more expensive, much bigger budget anyway. It made more sense for them to get a professional voiceover involved, which echoes the sentiments of what they're trying to sell and the lifestyle that they're trying to sell, as opposed to, your corner street estate agent where the turnover of sales is potentially incredibly rapid, and you've got estate agents just using their phones to do it themselves. And obviously I've created content that addresses all of these different pain points and how I could improve and riff on it at the same kind of like time. But it's been an education for me as a result. So regardless of the return on investment being much lower than what I was used to, I still feel as if it's an area of the voiceover industry or voiceover work that I have looked at thoroughly, that I've engaged, that I've created content that is evergreen content to a certain degree, really. It will exist on my website for a certain number of years and will be of use in that for anybody who visits my website with estate agents or property development in mind. It's educated me more in terms of exactly what those pressure points are, and so I feel as if I have gained a lot despite the quote-unquote failure of my return of investment ratio being much lower than I would normally be used to. The other way in which this is really useful is that it forces you to interrogate what you really want to do as well. So yes, it was an area that I just thought might be particularly pertinent, ripe for voiceover opportunity, and I'm glad that I did it, and I got a couple of really good clients and some nice work as a result of all of those kind of things. But it's only really through the process of properly engaging and looking at a sector and looking at potential clients or collaborators that really will answer a lot of questions about, well, what is the type of work that I want to do? For some voiceovers, when they start out, they know exactly what kind of work that they want to do. They want to work in animation, or they want to do documentaries, or they want to do TV commercials for particularly big brands, or, they want to voice their football team stuff, all of these different things that they could be. For me, I didn't have quite so much of this is the one thing that I necessarily wanted to do. I wanted to pull on a whole kind of different variety of different things. So that was kind of useful. But I think it's very useful to get into this process of interrogating also whether or not a particular area is what you really, really want to do. And an example of this that I would also give is video games. For me, am I interested in doing video games? If you ask the vast majority of voiceover artists or voice actors if they're interested in doing video games, they'll be going like, yes, because it's such a burgeoning industry and it's so exciting, and you can play all these exciting characters, and it's a bigger industry than the film industry. It's all about the entertainment, etc., etc., etc. And that's all very, very, very true. However, I would say that this whole kind of process with estate agents has helped to refine my lead generation process for contacting game devs. Rather than having an approach where I just kind of go yes, any and every game dev is what I should be reaching out to introduce myself and all of this kind of stuff. It's given me a clear awareness that there are certain genres and things that exist in the game world in terms of voiceover acting, which I'm less interested in. Not that I would necessarily turn down by any stretch of the imagination, but in terms of if we're pursuing an area of voiceover work for, artistic satisfaction, first and foremost, as a priority, which I choose to with the video game stuff, then there are certain developers and there are certain types of games that really interest me, that I really want to pursue, and there's other stuff where I'm less interested in. Now, I can still do it. Some other areas of video game work and animation work I really can't do because I don't have that skill set, but it's just being very aware of actually when I am spending time looking at a different genre, a different area of voiceover, and I'm trying to niche down, what can I learn from my previous experience? And it might be, it is for me anyway, is that I have less of an interest in contacting game devs who create games where essentially you're shouting the same line in 3 different ways with no real kind of significance to it. Sometimes it's fun, a few times it's fun. Those projects can still be really fun to do. I'm not denigrating it because I've done it a lot. But in terms of the awareness of what I actually really, really want to do, I want to place my focus on certain game devs over other game devs as a result, rather than going any video game offering is great and I would love to do it regardless of what the rate is, etc., etc., etc. So it's having that mindfulness to it. Same thing in terms of creature work, for example. I do quite a bit of creature work, especially voiceover creature work, and I think I've got a good skill set for it, but is it something that I actively pursue? Not really. And in terms of, is it something that I want to focus my skill sets on even more so I can get much better at that kind of hyper-characterization? No, not really, in all honesty. I think there are people that are better out there that I would happily recommend for that kind of stuff. So I know what my skill set is, but I also know what stimulates me most to keep developing my skill set. And so there just needs to be a differentiation. That's not saying that I'm, cutting myself out of a certain types of work or certain other types of work. It's just having that awareness and that presence of mind when you're going through the whole prospecting journey. I hope that's made some kind of sense. Anyway, I found it very interesting for me personally to get that level of kind of self-awareness about, even if you do spend time on an area and kind of thinking, oh, actually, I've hit a bit of a dead end, to go, well, that's a learning thing. You've realised, you've investigated that area as much as possible for where you are now. You've learned some lessons, hopefully, about the whole kind of process, whether you want to do it, if you did want to do it and you wanted to try again in the future, what you would change and what you would do the same in all of those kind of ways. And to basically pull positives out of that negative experience, I think is integral if you want to run a business and a long career in voiceover. Thank you so much as ever for joining me. I hope you found this useful. Please do please do subscribe, please do comment with all of your thoughts if you've kind of like looked at different genres and not been sure, or been scared to start looking at an area because you weren't sure. And please do check out the video next time. Take care.